we have a date for the June monthly BidBuy training, which is going to be Wednesday, June 17th. Fun fact of the day, and then May and June are the time for renewals, so it seemed appropriate to go over the renewal process in BidBuy. Okay, so first off, we do have a training video that is for a vendor instruction that is going to be on the vendor instructions page for how to submit to an RFP. If you remember with our job aids, we have those two attachments. One is going to be a vendor instruction to submit the technical response. One is a vendor instruction to submit pricing. And we put the link to a video that was specifically for vendors. So not only do they have the instructions in a document, but there's also a link that they can go and see a YouTube video. And I just walk through exactly what a vendor does to submit to an RFP. So the link's been added. So make sure you're going out and using the updated vendor instructions. So just as a reminder, if you're doing an RFP, let me go ahead and get out of here. It is, so our general services, right, just as a reminder to get back to our job aids, CPOGS site, you go to BidBuy, and then BidBuy resources for state agencies. And that takes us to our BidBuy job aid page. If you scroll down, under request for proposal, so right next to your job aid, you're going to see vendor instructions to submit technical proposals, vendor instruction to submit pricing. So just make sure you're using the most updated version. I pull up there. Nothing else has changed except for we've added, please click on the link below to access the tutorial how to respond electronically to an RFP. Okay. Okay, so we have an announcement that we are going to do our monthly BidBuy training Wednesday, June 17th at 9 a.m. Now, normally in a perfect world, we'd be in the Stratton building and we'd be able to be together in person. But the benefit of being able to do it remotely is last time we had over 200 people join us, so that was fantastic. I think we had 250 people join us, and that's great. So we get a good reach out there, and we can really get a lot done. But the format that we did last in May, I think, was really helpful because we had specific times that we would do specific topics. So that way, if you were busy, people could kind of come and go as they were able to. So we're going to stick with that same format moving forward. I think it was very beneficial. The feedback we got was positive. So at 9 a.m. we'll do the introduction, overview, general navigation, and then we end up taking a little bit of break in between. So it gives people some time to either work on their other duties as they need to, or a chance to walk through some of the practice activities that we provide. So 9 a.m. is the intro, general navigation. 10 o'clock is a small purchase under $10,000. 11 o'clock will be a small purchase $10,000 and over. And then at 1 p.m., we'll do a release off master. Most likely we are done by 2 p.m. on those days. You do not need to register ahead of time. You will just go to this link. There's no password needed. It's very similar to what we're doing on these training Tuesdays. So you can just join us and feel free to jump in and out of the training as you see fit. Join us the whole day. That'd be great. But we also have some videos for instance, we do have on the training center, we have a general navigation video. So what I go through on those days is essentially it's everything that's on that video anyway. So if you want to get a head start, maybe you're a new employee, or maybe you have new responsibilities that require you to work in BidBuy, go out and take a look at that video, and it's going to really give you a head start to what we would be talking about on that Wednesday, June 17th to begin with. Like I said, no registration necessary. Just feel free to join us on that day. So just friendly reminder, now that it's June 2nd, I don't think I need to remind anybody, but that fiscal year end, a few weeks ago I said fiscal year end is right around the corner. Now it's kind of a steam train bowling straight towards us. So seems appropriate that we would touch on some renewals. So our BidBuy activity is going to be renewals. Just a note here that the renewals must be fully executed on or before the expiration of that current contract term. So if you don't get it fully executed by the time that the contract term ends, that contract is dead, and then you cannot renew it. So it's really important to get that done. Like I said, I should say, many agencies have contracts that are tied to end of fiscal year. That's not always the case, but certainly we know that July 1 is a big date for us procurement folks. Quick question. Has the emergency proclamation as it pertains to procurement been extended? No, it has not. So that's a great question. There'll probably be some more questions that extend from this, but the way I understand it is it's not going to be extended. So now the agencies will be doing procurements for PPE, et cetera. I will circle back and just make sure that's the case, but that will, as of last week, that was the guidance that I received. So our fun fact of the day before we get into our BidBuy activity. So June 2nd, 2004, Ken Jennings began his 74-game winning streak on Jeopardy and became a household name. So his winnings, this is a lot more than I thought. His winnings ended up totaling, $3.4 million, which is just insane. So if you guys ever remember going back and, obviously I love Jeopardy, but that was a big deal. 74 games in a row, and Ken Jennings was essentially like a computer. All right, so let's get into doing a renewal in BidBuy. And obviously, we'll always have our slides posted out on our training center, so that'll go out there. So let's go to, we have a job aid for renewal. So we're going to be working through that today. So as a part of our renewals, it needs to be posted out prior to, for 14 days. And of course, it needs to end up getting executed prior to the end of that date. So if you're looking at, if you're looking at a July 1 or June 30th, I should say, June 30th is when a current contract is ending. Those are going to need to be posted in the next couple weeks, okay? And then they'll be executed prior to that June 30th date. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a renewal requisition, a renewal bid, because that bid piece is where we're actually posting out to the public. And then we do a renewal bid tab, since that interfaces with PPB. And then we're going to go back to the original change order, or to the original purchase order, and do a change order to that. So we won't convert this renewal bid to a PO. So you're only going to have one PO, but once you start doing renewals on that PO, you'll end up having change orders to change some of that information and to attach all the renewal documentation. Okay, so I'll get logged in here. Go back to my home screen. So this is what it'll look like. We're going to create a requisition by clicking the plus sign. I hit requisition. I'm going to have a new requisition. And we're going to really lean on these job aids. I haven't done one of these in a while, so I'll be clicking back and forth to make sure I don't miss anything. So we're on our general tab. For the short description, we're going to begin with renewal notice. And that just makes it very clear to anybody who's taking a look at this is we're not going to be receiving quotes. This is going to specifically only be to publicly post that this is a renewal notice. Renewal notice. And then as long as you begin with that, that's fine. But you could put, what it's going to be, whether that's, renewal notice of a specific contract, whether you use the vendor or if you use the good or service, that would be fine. Just start with renewal notice. Okay. Requisition is going to be open market, and then the type code, select as appropriate. So we have an open market requisition, which then opens up the type code, and then you select whatever is appropriate. Link to the original contract. So what we want to do here is we want to link back to that original PO, so that way it's easy to go back and forth between the two. So we select the magnifying glass. It brings a pop-up. a document type, we're going to be going back to the original purchase order to link it to this renewal requisition. And then whether, you will go find it, whether it is, if I know the PO number or the description, I can go in and see any of these potential parameters. I can go in and find that. Most of the time, you would probably go find that PO first so you know what it is. I click find it. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to exit. I'm going to click the magnifying glass again. Purchase orders. Let's see, what was the one I was going to do? I think it was a that's not it. It was a lease for DHS. I do remember that. There it is. Okay, so we select the radio button and then hit select. And now we're going to have a hyperlink that goes back to that original purchase order. That's going to be really helpful moving forward. Save and continue. Now we're going to follow through our job aids and hit all the tabs that are appropriate. So our items, we're going to add one line item for the total renewal with estimated cost. Okay, so we get our items. We're going to add open market item. So you have one, we're only going to have one item for all the renewals. So in our description is you're just going to explain, the renewal description here of what is being renewed. Quantity will be 1. The estimated cost of what is being renewed here, you just put in the estimated cost that you would go back to. That original contract is going to have what your renewal cost is, because all that renewal pricing would have been a part of the original contract. Okay, so you can go back and double check that. The unit of measure will just be each, because if you think about it, this is just the renewal item. You're not going to necessarily put it in as a bunch of different units of measure. This just is going to cover the entire renewal option. Put in your NIGP code. In this case, it's a 97145 lease. You can save and exit. Okay, vendors, this is going to be added at the bid tab, or I'm sorry, at the bidders tab, at the bid stage. So, right, so vendors will be added at the bid stage in the bidders tab. So we can kind of skip that. The address will be defaulted to whatever your account is set up at. So if you need to change that, you can. Then we get to accounting. Now we have that red validation error, hard stop. So we need to add our accounting code. Once again, that accounting code is just for the to trigger the proper approval paths. So you can click find it, or if you know it's going to be renewal, I could go to R and hit renewal. So hit find it, get all my options. Now, normally on a lot of these, you're hitting not applicable, right? But in this case, it's actually a renewal. So we hit renewal because potentially your agency could be set up to certain different people are approvers on a renewal versus, a not applicable procurement. And then we say based on percentages and renew or rebuild for all items. So the accounting, we do that same thing every single time. We select our account code, then we hit save based on percentages and rebuild for all items. And so what that does is when you hit rebuild for all items, you're taking that renewal accounting code and applying it back to your line items up in the items tab at the line item level. Attachments, we'll go back to our job aid and see what needs to be there. We have that procurement justification form, BEP goal setting review form, any all agency or agency specific form. So if you have some sort of internal form that needed to be approved before it even gets into BidBuy, like, yes, we are deciding to renew this contract, there could be a different purchase request form there. Okay, so we're going to say I attached all those documents that I needed to for the procurement justification form, BEP goal setting form, et cetera, just so we can move along. Now, just as a reminder, let me show you how to do one. Attach one, you add file, then you select choose file, and then it brings up all your drives on the left-hand side. If you need to potentially select something in the N drive, or if it's something that's on your computer, you can go in and grab it. I don't know, I'll grab it, just something there so we have that there. We'll say this is the procurement justification form. That is not going to be shown to the vendor. Here's a good question. Are we doing a new BEP review for the renewal, or are we attaching the original review? No, it'll be a new renew. So the way I understand it is that it'll be a new BEP review form each time, um, assuming it's over, over the $100,000, and they'll be on that approval path in the requisition. BEP will be, because potentially you could have a contract that did not have a BEP goal a few years ago, and it's going to depend, because there could be some older contracts where maybe there wasn't a BEP review at the beginning of that contract, but now there could be a review for it. So we're done with our attachments. Notes, reminders. Notes are just internal. Vendors can't see it. Anybody who has access to this document can see it though. Summary tab, and submit for approval. It'll go through the proper approval paths. It'll hit CMS, BEP, and go through the rest of the approval paths. But since we're in the training environment, we get to automatically approve. Woohoo! Okay, so going back to our job aid here, we submit for approval, and we're going to convert to bid. So we have a couple different options here. We're going to be posting this renewal notice to the public. It's not requesting a bid from the public. So we just have a note there just to kind of remind you that we're only posting it publicly. We're not actually going to receive any quotes. So now it's in that ready for purchasing stage. If I would go back to, make it a real world example, I should go back to the home screen, because you're not just going to be sitting on that page waiting for all your approvals. So that's going to live in, there's a couple different options that we have on the job aid. Most likely, I would say it's going to be living in your recent documents. I use this queue all the time. So that's one option. The other option is it would be a requisitions ready for purchasing. It could live in that action item box there. Also, it will be living in your requisitions queue on the left-hand side. If you select that, in progress, ready for approval, it'll be living in the ready for purchasing queue there. Okay, so either way, to find the same, three options to find that requisition. Am I on mute? I just lost you. No, I'm not. I don't think I am. Nope. Can everybody else hear me? Oh, never mind. Oh, WebEx hung up on you. Sorry. That happens. Okay, so now we are going to scroll down to the bottom of our requisition, and we're going to convert to bid so that we can publicly post. Are you sure you want to convert this requisition? Yes. And now most of the activity is going to be happening here at the bid. There's going to be a lot more attachments. So we have our hyperlink to our new bid. We select the new hyperlink, and now we will process that bid. I know sometimes it can be confusing when we use the terminology bid, because it's inherent that we're thinking about, well, when you put something out to bid, you're receiving quotes. But just as a reminder, we have our 3 stages, or 4 stages really if you count the bid tab. We have requisition, which is our need in getting CMS approval, BEP approval, and then we convert it to bid, which makes it public. So we're not just doing the bid to receive quotes. It's the stage where we can publish it. Published documents. So notices, sole source hearings, certainly renewal notices are all going to be at the bid stage. And then we have the bid tab where we actually select the vendor for award, which interfaces with the procurement policy board, the PPB, what's it called? Clearinghouse, sorry. And then we convert that to PO, and that's our contract vehicle. So just as a quick high-level view, when I'm saying bid, sometimes it can be confusing when we're doing a renewal, but we're still doing it at the bid stage. Okay, so let's go back to our general tab. We do have some missing dates here and some information that we need to complete. So let's go back to our job aid and walk right through the steps. Okay, so our short description, it's already began with renewal notice, but for whatever reason, if that wasn't done at the requisition correctly, you could go in and change the short description to start with renewal notice. We already have that. Our type code is going to be renewal at the bottom. We are going to uncheck the allow electronic response, right? Because we don't want to allow anyone to even submit to this. This is just to be a publication. Enable rolling enrollment, we're going to check that. The bid opening date, allow for approvals, and the required 14-day public posting period. So, make sure that that is clear. We don't want to put this in for 14 days, and then if it gets to the SPO tomorrow, that's not allowing for all 14 days. So, build in a few extra days for that. This renewal will say, so for instance, if it's Tuesday, I'm probably going to put it in for, certainly since I have plenty of time, I may just make it Friday the 19th, whatever time. That's going to give us plenty of time. It's going to be publicly posted long enough. And as long as we select enable rolling enrollment, we're going to be able to go in and continue to process this and make the award and everything that we need to do prior to that bid opening date. So if we don't check enable rolling enrollment, and this is where it becomes really important to follow those instructions, is if this isn't checked, we won't be able to even open the bid. We wouldn't be able to do anything at the bid tab until June 19th. So that's what that enable rolling enrollment box is and why it's so important. Available date, we'll just select today or now. Bulletin description, we can just copy and paste, or we actually want to put in here renewal notice. This is not a solicitation. And then we just put in the details of the renewal period. So that way, because vendors are still going to receive notice of this, and that way it makes it very clear for them when they pull it up, and they can look at it in the bulletin description. This is, they're saying renewal notice. This is not a solicitation. So they know that they don't even need to waste time looking at trying to, put in a bid or anything like that. And then you can just put in details of the contract renewing. Contract, maybe one of two renewal options. Just some details in there to make it clear. SPO name, put in your SPO name. Is this a small business set aside procurement or not? Just answer that correctly. I'm guessing most of those are no, but certainly you could have renewals. Is there BEP, BBP participation goal? Just to answer appropriately if there is or not. We'll say for this one, yes, there was. We'll say the BEP percentage was 15%, and there was a 3% VBP goal. Now we already have our link to the original contract here, so that's always going to go back to that original PO. But for some reason, if that was not done, according to our job aid here, you link, select the PO with the magnifying glass if it was not already done at the requisition. But we're good here. We have everything here. Save and continue. You won't need to do anything with the items, right? That's already been done. The address, the accounting has already been done, and then we get to the attachments. The attachments, this is where we're going to have a few more documents to put in there. This is where you're going to have the unsigned notice of award, comptroller offset, if it's over $250,000, the PPB questions, and then you have one of three options. We have, vendors can fill out Forms A or Forms B and the IPG printouts, including the ownership information, or what's called the certificate of no change. So if nothing has changed from all of their financial disclosures and conflicts of interest forms, their Forms A, Forms B, they don't have to complete all those forms again. They can just complete a certificate of no change, and that is certainly appropriate. And where that is, it's in our procurement resource library on our CPOGS site, and it lives in the solicitation and contract templates and forms. And where is it? Certificate of no change for contract renewal. You can click on that. Show you what it looks like. Really what it is, they complete it, and it's just a few pages. They just check a box, nothing's changed from my financial disclosures, conflicts of interest, and standard certifications. They sign, date, etc. So it makes it a little bit easier to do a renewal. And I just want to make sure that you guys know that that is an option for you. Okay, so you're going to attach all those documents. If there was a conflict of interest review form, or if there was a conflict of interest, you would walk through the conflict of interest review process. You have the draft or a vendor signed renewal document, because that's going to need to be approved by the SPO. Any approved goal setting forms, and once again, if there's any of those other agency specific forms for your agency. So you go in and put in all those documents. Let's just go in and attach one just so you can see what it looks like. We add file, choose file, and then we're going to say they used a certificate of no change. Okay. So that's there, right? Let's just pretend that we added all the other, 4 or 5 documents that needs to be there, the unsigned notice of award, because what the SPO is going to do is, and the vendor signed or a draft of the renewal is, they'll be, before they would even publish this out, they're going to need to make sure that they approve. So we're approving of the method, the procurement method, at the bid stage, but then we attach that unsigned notice of award. So then the SPO can download the notice of award. They can sign it. They're going to turn around and do a bid amendment to this bid to attach the signed notice of award. Okay, then we get to bidders, and we're going to add all our bidders by that NIGP code. Okay, so this is going to be very similar to if we were putting a competitive solicitation out, we would select all our vendors with that NIGP code. We're going to do the same exact thing when we are doing a renewal notice. So we look up and add vendors. I'm going to clear that out. We're going to search for all vendors with the 97145 in this case. You can type it in, or so if I hit 45 enter, it puts it in, or you can always use the drop down as well. Okay, so we select find it. We're going to get all our vendors with that NIGP code. We select that top box. It's going to say, hey, you have a lot of them selected here. Okay. Scroll down to the bottom, and then we will save and exit. All right, so this is going to be, well, once it comes up, it's still thinking. This will be an unrestricted bid, so as a part of our bidder participation, you'll select unrestricted bid. We need that to be posted out for all, and then scroll down the bottom and save and continue. All right, so at this point we have all our documents attached. We have our unsigned notice of award. We have our vendor signed renewal. And then we are going to be able to submit this for approval. We're not utilizing questions, amendments, Q&A, reminders at this point. Summary. Submit for approval, and it'll go through the proper renewal approval paths. Submit for approval. Obviously, normally you will see just who's it going to next in that approval path. You'll just select OK or continue. But today we get to automatically approve, so it moves right through those approval paths quickly. Good. All right. So the SPO will approve the bid and then turn around and send the bid. So you won't see this part. So the SPO goes ahead and sends the bid. There, and I have documentation or confirmation, I should say, that yep, it went out to all those vendors. At this point, the SPO is going to review the notice of award or approve the notice of award, sign it, and they're going to do a bid amendment to attach that signed notice of award. So if I scroll back to our job aid, you can see that the SPO will also set a reminder to PPB if the renewal is above $250,000 and above. So what you'll see on some of those, in this case it is, the SPO will go in and do reminder, remind whom, select PPB, set the due date at 14 days, right? Select the due date will be 14 days out. So here is the 16th. Oh, sorry. We're requesting a waiver. Days prior to remind is 14 because essentially what that does is it sends the email to PPB right now and it's giving them 14 days to do the waiver request. Continue. Like I said, you won't be doing that. That's an SPO responsibility only if the renewal is over $250,000. And then we'll do a bid amendment to publish the SPO signed notice of award. So you'll see that there's a bid amendment, and this will also be an SPO function. They'll create a bid amendment. They will go to attachments. We will add an attachment. Choose file. Sorry, I realize I'm going pretty fast here, but it's just because you guys aren't going to be doing that. Let me just grab something that I can use. We'll say this is the notice of award. And that is going to be shown to the vendor. Okay, so that's going to be the public document, will be that notice of award. So at this point, we're not going to convert this. Let me go back to bid. And I need to apply the amendment, which is what the SPO will do. Apply the bid amendment. And since we selected, remember back on that general tab where we selected enable rolling enrollment, now this is going to allow us, now that we have a notice of award, it's going to allow us to go in and award to the vendor in BidBuy. So we've already publicly said we are renewing this contract with this vendor, but we need to go in and open the bid and do all that processing. And by enable rolling enrollment, it allows us to do that. If we didn't check rolling enrollment, we would have to wait until that June 19th date that we set as our bid opening date. So we're going to go in and so you wouldn't even have the chance to open the bid, but since we did enable rolling enrollment, you can click open bid. And then we're going to go into the bid tab of once we open the bid. So let me go back to our job aid just so we see I'm not confusing anybody. In the bid tab, we're going to go to the summary tab of the bid, which I just did, and I selected open bid at the bottom of the page. And now we're going to select bid tab at the bottom of the page to create the quote so that we can go in and select that vendor. So I scroll down to the bottom, I select bid tab, and then create new quote. So now I'm inside the quote for the bid tab. We select our vendor. What was the vendor? I think it was Bucky Brown. Received date, just be now. Save and continue. Now, you're going to see that I get this error terms and conditions is not acknowledged, that's totally fine. All that means is it's letting us know it saved this, and so we can move on. But we're gonna acknowledge the terms and conditions once we get into the terms and conditions page. So sometimes I think people can get confused that that error pops up, and all that means is before you're able to submit this quote, you're going to have to acknowledge those terms and conditions. So in our items tab is where we put the pricing of that renewal. I think we had it at 800,000. Save and continue. And then the only other thing we're going to need to do is terms and conditions. We're not doing questions. You don't have to put any subcontractor information there. Terms and conditions. Do you accept the terms and conditions of the bid? Select yes and save and continue. So if I'm going back to my job aid again, we'll see where we're at. I had created the new quote. I put in the vendor and receive date. I entered the price to match the renewal pricing, so that you're going to go back to that original contract to make sure that that renewal pricing matches up. Quote terms and conditions tab, select yes. As a part of the attachments tab, if there were any updated documents that you needed to attach to the file, you could at this point. Most likely you already have all that documentation that we put in at the bid. But maybe there was some corrections that needed to for financial disclosures or something like that, and you needed to put in any updated documents. You could do that here. Then we'll go to the summary of the quote and submit the quote. So I submit my quote. Are you sure you want to submit the quote? Yes. And so now when I go back to let's see, we have a question pop up. So the received date can be now. We already know who is being selected, for instance, in a change order, extending date, or in this case, a renewal. Absolutely, you're right. So whenever, or I should say, your understanding is correct. Yes, that whenever you're putting in the received date on something like this, it's not the same thing as say you did a small purchase and they, dropped it off in paper or they emailed you a quote, or it's back in the paper world, which seems like 1,000 years ago to me now. An IFB they submitted via paper or something, and you had to go in and put it in on their behalf. At that point, you would go back and you'd be looking at that timestamp when the paper was received or when you received an email quote for a small purchase, because that needs to match up. But in this case, you're just putting it in on their behalf, so it can just be right now. This would be the same for if you did like a sole source or something where you're putting in the quote in the bid tab on behalf of the vendor. So now when I go back to the bid, and once again, I'm just walking down that job aid. So I hit, submit quote. I selected back to bid. I'm going to go to the bid tab, items tab, and I'm going to select that vendor. So the system at this point doesn't realize that we've selected the vendor for award. So we need to go back and do that. So we're in the bid tab. Select bid tab. In the items tab of the bid tab, which can be confusing. So items tab, we're going to select that vendor and then submit for approval. So items, at this point you have one, either I select them by checking that box or I can select award all. In this case, we only have the one line item, so it makes it very easy. We can select award all. Okay, so now you see that that box is checked. They have been awarded. And then we go to the summary tab. We just double check. Yep. Nope, we don't need to have no other attachments need to be there. So in the summary tab of the bid tab, after we've awarded them, we will submit for approval. Now, of course, at this point, the SPO has already signed the notice of award. They've already, gone through the, they've already approved the renewal. So this most likely takes very little time. So automatically approved since we're in the training environment. And so at this point, we're going to stop, right? So normally on any other procurements, we would be creating a PO once the bid tab is approved. But remember, we're just doing this bid for the renewal just to publicly post it, and we do the bid tab so that it interfaces with the PPB clearinghouse. We are going to be done with this bid. It'll just sit like this forever. We need to go back to our job aid, right? big highlighted, do not convert to PO. We're going to go back to the original PO. We're going to access the original PO, and then we're going to update the fields, attach the renewal contract information, and do a change order to that original PO. Okay, I understand that can be kind of confusing sometimes. So we are done with this bid. All we needed to do was publicly post it and then do the award in the bid tab. Now we're going to go back to the original PO, do a change order to complete the rest of this renewal. So if I go back to home, I will go to that original purchase order and continue to follow our job aid. So let's go back to the job aid. We navigate to the original PO. We're going to create a change order to the original PO. So we go to the change order tab and then we hit create change order. So change orders, we're going to create change order, right? Because remember, this is the original PO. And now we're going to have some things that we need to do here. Okay, so go to the general tab. Now so a couple dates that we're going to change. The actual contract begin date, we're not going to change that. We are going to change the renewal dates, but we're not going to be changing the actual contract start date. Okay, so in the general tab, we had the contract begin date. The contract end date now is we're going to update it. Okay, so we're going to say this originally, I think that should have said 2019. Just to be clear. That should have said July 1st, 2020 or 2019 to 2019. Sorry, makes it a little confusing if you're looking at that. So yeah, we'll say it was July 1st last year to 6/30 of 2020. We're going to update the contract end date to include this renewal. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this date. It's going to be going to 6/30, 2021. In this case, we'll say it's just 1 year. Whatever the appropriate date is for your renewal, because some of your renewals may be more than 1 year. So we're going to go June 30th, 2021. Okay, number of renewals. If you're utilizing those, the number of times you can renew. Now, I will say this. So if you don't put anything in this field, because it's not a required field, so this is where you're going to have to really go back to your agency and say, look, are we utilizing this function within BidBuy? It certainly is an option. If you don't put anything in this required field, you won't have these other fields that pop up. So I want to, kind of stave off any confusion. If you're looking at the job aid, for instance, and it has the number of times you can renew, number of renewal terms, renewal term units, next renewal start date, renewal bid number, you're saying, Dave, I don't see those there. Now, the reason why those aren't there is because I didn't put anything in here in the number of renewals when I originally did the PO. But watch what happens when say, okay, well, there's a potential of 2 renewals. What happens is now it brings up these new fields. Okay, well, what are the number of renewal units? How many is this going to be? 1 year or not? So we'll say it's 1. So that's where that kind of comes in, the renewal term units. So is it 1 year? Is it 1 month? So make it 1 year, and then it brings up the next renewal start date. So some agencies are utilizing this functionality and some agencies are not. So this is where you'll just have to go back to your agency and see if you're using it or not. Now, I think it can be very handy because you can run reports off of these renewals. You can look at something and run a report to say, how many renewals are we going to need to change this year? Those sorts of things. But if it wasn't originally put in the correct way, there's a potential for it's kind of, the motto garbage in, garbage out if the proper information isn't completed right on initially. So just as a review, if your agency is using it, you're going to see those fields. If your agency does not put anything in this number of renewals, the number of times you can renew, you're not going to change it. So let's go with the assumption that this was done that way. originally it said, there's going to be 2 renewal options for 1 year apiece. What you need to go in is now we're going to do a change order. We're going to change this. So we're going to reduce as appropriate. So the number of renewal terms, you're going to change the number of renewals you can change, right? Because if once we do this renewal, we're going to, from here on out, we're going to say, oh, then now this only has 1 more renewal option. Now, no matter what, the SPO is always going to go back to the original contract and double check. So that's going to, you wouldn't be able to um, renew a contract if it's out of renewal options, I guess is what I mean. So we changed that by 1. We're still doing it by 1 year. So the next renewal start date would be July 1, 2021. So it definitely can be very handy if you want to put that information in there. Okay, next renewal start date. The renewal bid number, you can put that in there. Yeah, renewal bid number, so that kind of, you have that other bid number listed there. SAP vendor number, all that stuff none of that should be changing. So the full SAP contract value, now this is going to take into account the renewal option there. So what was that, 800,000? The items, actually at this point in the original PO, there should have not been a renewal on there. That's interesting. So I did that wrong when I did the PO, whenever I did this original PO, because you would have to add the renewal term, because that original initial term for that PO should have been deleted all the renewal terms, because that PO was just for the initial term, and we would be adding the renewal term here. So you would add an item, you'd put in the renewal term for that PO. So for instance, if you're not renewing an item, you're going to go in and zero out the item cost, quantity, etc. For items that will be renewed, you're going to update the document or the items as if you need to. So you could go in and go, all right, well, the initial term for this is, so much. You're going to go in and update that item to put in the actual renewal cost. So for the renewal, it was $800,000 here. Save and exit. We're just going to act like I did it right the first time a while back and didn't have that renewal term listed here. It'll be our little secret that is now recorded for all to see. Subcontractors, address, accounting, none of that will need to be changed. The attachments, right, we're going to have to go in and put in the vendor signed renewal, because what is happening at this change order is the approval for this change order will be providing the authority for the agency to execute. So that has to happen by the SPO. So we're going to put in the vendor signed renewal document, the published renewal NOA. So this one document here, which is the published renewal NOA, was also on that other bid. So that's going to be living in 2 places. One, it needs to be there for that bid to be public, right? The whole reason we did that last bid, but it also needs to live in this procurement file. So we're adding it there. As well as IOC offset if 30 days have passed since we published that other renewal. So if you had done any other renewals, perhaps, if you were on the ball and did it, in April or May, if 30 days have passed from the time that you published that other bid saying that you're going to renew the contract, you need to do another IOC offset. So we'll go in and we'll add file, choose file, and then we'll go in and grab a document. We'll say that this was the NOA document, because we have to add it to this procurement file, right? And then we'll say this is the vendor signed renewal. Okay, and then you can always see, just as a reminder, do we show to vendor or make it confidential? There's going to be not show to vendor and yes for confidential for each of these. So not show to vendor and confidential. Just as a reminder, don't execute that renewal until you get to this stage. So don't have the agency sign it. It has to be after you provide the after the SPO provides their approval. Then we go to summary, and we're going to submit this for approval. For the comment for the change order, you can describe what the renewal is, right? You can say this is renewal option 1 of 2. I think that's what we had originally said. And then, you always do have the option when you do change orders to uncheck whether it's showing this, these change orders to the vendor. And it will just be to that one vendor too. So once we're at the PO, we're not publishing it out to everybody. It's just going to be that vendor. Then we submit for approval. So the approval path for the change order is probably very minimal, but certainly the SPO will be on that change on the approval path because they're providing their authority or that approval in order to execute that contract. Okay, so go back to our job aid. We create the change order, go through the conduct the approvals, etc. And then and this is interesting too because it's more important for those renewals, for master contracts, that you wouldn't want to apply the change order and change pricing until the actual date that the contract starts. Because it's not going to be the case for a lot of the other contracts. You could go ahead and, apply the change order once you put in your the end dates. But it's important for those master contracts because if as soon as you apply it and change that actual contract end date or change pricing, if you're ordering off of that contract, it would change that pricing too. So if you look down at the bottom of our job aid, please note if price is changing for the renewal term, do not apply the change order until the start date of that change order. So helpful hint, set a reminder to apply the change order on the proper date. Now that may not may not be the case for many of you, but if it does, if anyone's ordering off of this contract, you don't want to apply the change order until July 1. So at that point, if maybe you have an agency specific master contract or something like that, the pricing, if they're ordering it 2 weeks prior, they're still getting the proper pricing, etc. Okay. At that point, everything is done. We apply the change order. And then at that point, you're able to execute the contract, and then you can do another change order, right? So you're going to have 2 change orders on these renewals each time. The first change order is going to be putting in the vendor signed renewal document so that the SPO can provide that approval in BidBuy to execute the contract. Then you're going to have that second change order to just attach the fully executed renewal. Okay. So quite a long training Tuesday this week. Sorry about that. Normally they are pretty short, but I think it was really important considering the time of the year we're in, and we're moving into these next few weeks where we're going to be processing a lot of renewals. So this is going to be recorded. It'll be posted out later today. Since this is a longer recording, it takes a little bit longer for it to render. So if it's not up by this afternoon, it'll certainly be up tomorrow morning. I don't see any other questions, so we'll let you go and have a fantastic rest of your week, everybody. Thank you so much.